you could be losing hundreds of dollars a fortnight without even realizing why. Right now, thousands of single pensioners across New Zealand are asking the same question. Is work and income quietly paying them less than everyone else simply because they live alone or because they're single? Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly what the 2026 NZ super rates say, what MSD's own numbers actually show, and where the real risk to your payment is hiding. If you're single and on NZ Super, or about to be, this is one you need to watch all the way through. I'm David, and you're watching New Zealand Pension Plan, the channel where we break down NZ Super, government support programs, and important updates that could affect your finances so you can make informed decisions and make sure you're receiving every entitlement you may qualify for. Let's get straight into it because this question comes up again and again in the comments section and across social media. People are asking, is MSD penalizing single pensioners in 2026? And honestly, the answer is more interesting and more useful to you than a simple yes or no. So stick with me, because in just a moment I'm going to show you the actual numbers from work and income, and one of them might genuinely surprise you. First, let's talk about what changed on the 1st of April 2026. Every year on the 1st of April, NZ super rates increase. This is called the annual general adjustment, and it happens automatically. You don't need to fill out a form, you don't need to ring anyone, and you don't need to apply for anything. If you're already receiving NZ Super, your new rate simply appears in your account. This year, the increase was tied to average wage growth, which is the formula the government uses every single year for NZ Super and the veterans' pension. It's different to how most other benefits are adjusted, which generally move with the Consumer's Price Index or CPI. NZ Super moves with wages instead, and that's an important distinction if you've ever wondered why pension increases sometimes look different to other government payment increases you hear about in the news. Now here's where it gets specific, and this is the part you really want to pay attention to if you're single. As of the 1st of April 2026, if you are single and living alone, or single with a dependent child, your fortnightly payment is $1,110.30 after tax on the standard M tax code. That's the figure straight from Work and Income's official rates table. Before tax, that's $1,294.74. Now compare that to a couple where both partners qualify for NZ Super. Each partner in that couple receives $854.08 a fortnight. Combined, that's $1,708.16 for the household. So here's the number that might surprise you. As a single person living alone, you are actually receiving more individually than each person in a couple. $1,110 compared to $854 each. That's not a penalty, that's actually the highest individual rate on the entire NZ Superscale. Let me give you a real-world example to make this land properly. Picture two retired sisters, Margaret and Susan. Margaret lives alone in her own flat in Hamilton. Susan lives with her husband, who also qualifies for NZ Super, in a house just down the road. Every fortnight, Margaret receives $1,110.30 into her account, entirely on her own. Susan and her husband each receive $854.08, which combined gives their household $1,708.16. As a household, Susan and her husband clearly have more coming in. But individually, Margaret is actually receiving more than either Susan or her husband personally. That's the nuance that gets lost when people talk about singles being penalized. The household comparison and the individual comparison tell two completely different stories, and most of the confusion online comes from people mixing the two up. This is exactly why I wanted to make this video, because rates tables on their own can be confusing, and once a claim starts circulating on social media, whether it's accurate or not, it tends to spread fast. So let's keep working through the detail because there's still an important payment date and a residency rule coming up that catches out more people than you'd think. So where does this idea come from, that single pensioners are somehow being treated unfairly? Stay with me because I want to walk you through exactly where this confusion starts, because it's a completely understandable mix-up. And once you understand it, you'll know exactly where to check your own situation. There are actually two different single rates, not one. The first is what we just covered, living alone, at $1,110.30 a fortnight. The second is for single people who are sharing accommodation with someone else, who is 18 or older, and that's not your partner. If that's your situation, your fortnightly rate is $1,024.90 after tax. That's about $85 a fortnight less than the living alone rate. This is the actual gap that a lot of people are reacting to online, and it's been part of NZ's super policy for a very long time. It's not a new 2026 change, and it's not something MSD introduced this year to target singles. The thinking behind it is that if you're sharing a home with another adult, some of your day-to-day living costs like power, internet, and general household running costs are assumed to be shared as well. Whether you personally agree with that assumption is a fair question to ask, but it's important for you to know it's not new, and it's not something that singles specifically are being targeted with in 2026. Now let's talk about why this matters for your bank account, because this is where I want you to take a moment and think about your own living situation. If someone moves in with you, an adult child, a flatmate, a friend, even a caregiver staying long-term, and that person stays with you for more than 13 weeks within any 26-week period, work and income can reclassify you from the living alone rate to the sharing rate. That's a real practical change to your payment, and here's the part that catches people out. If you don't tell work and income about that change, and they later find out, you may be asked to pay back the difference. That's not a penalty either, but it can feel like one if it comes out of nowhere. I'll come back to exactly what you need to do about this in a moment, because it's one of the most common and most avoidable mistakes I see pensioners make. Let's also clear up the couples question, because this is the other place the penalty idea tends to come from. If you're single and living alone, and then you enter into a relationship, even if your new partner is younger than 65 and doesn't qualify for NZ Super themselves, your payment generally shifts to the couple's rate, the $854.08 fortnightly rate, not the higher single rate you were on before. To a lot of people, that genuinely feels like being penalized for being in a relationship, because your individual entitlement appears to drop. But the way the government frames this is the opposite. The couple rate is lower per person because two people living together are assumed to have lower individual living costs. Similar logic to the sharing situation we just talked about. Either way, if your relationship status changes, you need to let work and income know, because this directly affects what lands in your account every fortnight. While we're talking about timing, I also want to mention something that trips a lot of people up every single year, not just in 2026. Because the 1st of April fell in the middle of a fortnightly pay period this year, the way your increase actually showed up in your account happened in stages. In the pay period running up to the 30th of March, you were still paid at the old rate. The very next payment, the one covering the week of the 6th of April, was a blended payment, part at the old rate and part at the new rate, because the increase only applied from the 1st of April onwards. It wasn't until the payment in the week of the 13th of April that pensioners saw their full new rate applied for an entire pay period. If you looked at your bank statement in early April and thought the increase looked smaller than expected, that's almost certainly why. It's not a mistake, and it's not a sign anything's wrong with your payment. It's simply how the timing works whenever the 1st of April doesn't line up neatly with the start of a pay period. Worth remembering for next year too, because this happens periodically depending on where Easter in the calendar fall. Now, in a moment, I'll explain the eligibility rule that catches out more people than you'd expect, even long-term New Zealand residents. But first, let's talk about tax codes, because this is a quiet payment reducer that has nothing to do with being single or partnered, and everything to do with what else is going on in your financial life. If NZ Super is your only income, you'll almost certainly be on the M tax code, and that's the rate I've been quoting throughout this video. But if you're still doing some part-time work, or you've got rental income, or some other income stream, alongside your pension, your tax code can change. Move to the S tax code, and that living alone rate of $1,110 drops to $1,068.30. Move to SH, and it drops further to $906.54. On ST, it's $867.72, and on SA, it's $790.08. That's a difference of well over $300 a fortnight between the best and worst tax code outcomes, and it has absolutely nothing to do with whether MSD is treating singles fairly. It's simply about making sure your tax code matches your actual total income. Let's put that into a practical example. Say you're a retired tradesperson living alone, and you pick up some casual relief work 2 days a week, bringing in a modest amount on top of your pension. The moment that other income becomes significant enough, Inland Revenue's rules mean your correct tax code is no longer M, it shifts to S, or potentially higher depending on how much you're earning in total. If you don't update work and income with your new tax code, two things can happen, and neither one is good. Either you end up taxed incorrectly and owe money back at the end of the tax year, or your NZ super payment simply doesn't reflect what you should actually be receiving after tax. Take a moment to consider whether this applies to your situation, especially if you've picked up any extra income over the past 12 months, even something small and irregular. If you've started part-time work or your income circumstances have changed, take a moment to check your tax code is still right for you, because this is one of the easiest places to lose money without even noticing. Here's something else you genuinely need to know about, and it's one of the most important parts of this whole video, so keep watching. If you or your partner are entitled to a pension from another country, the United Kingdom, Australia, almost anywhere with a state pension scheme, you are required to apply for it, and it can directly reduce your NZ superpayment dollar for dollar. This is called the Direct Deduction Policy. It's not new, and it's been a consistent source of confusion, and frankly, real financial stress for a number of pensioners over the years. There have been well-documented cases of MSD pursuing pensioners for repayment of money after discovering undeclared overseas pension entitlements, sometimes going back years, including reviews related to people who were stuck overseas during border closures in previous years, and ended up with payment disputes through no real fault of their own. To give you a sense of how this plays out, imagine someone who worked in the United Kingdom for a decade back in their 30s and 40s, then moved to New Zealand, and eventually applied for NZ Super at 65, without realizing they were also entitled to a small UK state pension. If that entitlement comes to light later, whether through an audit, a data match, or simply because the person mentions it to work and income, MSD can apply the deduction retrospectively, and that can mean a real debt building up that needs to be repaid. This isn't a hypothetical scare story, it's a documented pattern, and it's exactly the kind of thing that fuels genuine frustration about MSD penalizing pensioners. If you've ever worked or lived overseas, or you think you might have any kind of pension entitlement sitting in another country, even one you haven't touched in decades, sort it out proactively with work and income, rather than waiting for them to find it first. It is far better for you to raise it than for them to raise it with you. While we're on the subject of separating fact from rumor, it's worth being clear about a couple of other claims that circulate regularly. You may have seen posts suggesting there's a brand new pension scheme launching in 2026, or some kind of surprise bonus payment on top of the standard increase. As of this video, there is no official MSD or government announcement of any new scheme or one-off bonus beyond the standard annual general adjustment we've already covered. If you ever see a claim like that doing the rounds, the simple rule is to check it against Work and Income's own website or the Ministry of Social Development's official channels before assuming it's true. Government payment changes are always published officially well before they take effect. They're never something you'll only hear about secondhand through a forwarded message or a vague social media post. Now let's talk about who actually qualifies for NZ Super in the first place, because there's a detail here that surprises a lot of people, especially if you've spent time living or working overseas. To get NZ Super, you need to be 65 or older, you need to be a New Zealand citizen, permanent resident, or hold a residence class visa, and you need to be ordinarily resident in New Zealand, the Cook Islands, Niue, or Tokelau at the time you apply. But here's the part that trips people up. You also need to have lived in New Zealand for a certain number of years since you turned 20, and this isn't always 10 years like a lot of people assume. The exact number of years depends on your date of birth. If you were born on or before the 30th of June 1959, it's 10 years. But if you were born more recently, the requirement increases in stages, all the way up to 20 years of residence if you were born on or after the 1st of July 1977. In every case, 5 of those years need to have been lived in New Zealand after you turned 50. These years don't need to be one continuous stretch. They can be added up over your lifetime. But if you've spent significant time overseas, it's absolutely worth checking exactly where you stand well before you turn 65, not after. This actually matters more than people realize, because residency calculations can come down to genuinely small details. There have been real cases where someone has missed out on a full year of entitlement over a difference of a single day in their residency calculation. So, if your 65th birthday is coming up in the next few years and your life has involved any time spent overseas, take this as your prompt to check your situation properly with work and income well in advance, rather than assuming it will simply sort itself out on the day you apply. Let's bring this back to the practical side because I want you to walk away from this video knowing exactly what to do, not just what the numbers are. If you're single and living alone, confirm your current fortnightly rate matches $1,110.30 after tax on the M tax code. If it doesn't, the first thing to check is your tax code, and the second thing to check is whether work and income has the correct record of your living situation. If someone has moved in with you, even temporarily, and it's likely to be for more than 13 weeks within a 26-week period, contact work and income and update them. It's a 5-minute conversation that can save you from a much bigger, much more stressful conversation about repayment further down the track. If your relationship status has changed, whether you've started a new relationship or a relationship has ended, that needs to be reported too because it directly changes which rate applies to you. And if there's any chance you have an overseas pension entitlement sitting out there, even one you haven't thought about in years, get ahead of it. Contact Work and Income's International Services team and get it sorted on your terms. One more thing I want to mention because it's relevant to a lot of you watching, and that's the SuperGold Card. If you're receiving NZ Super, you should automatically be eligible for the SuperGold Card, which gives you access to off-peak public transport and a wide range of discounts from participating businesses around the country. It's a separate entitlement to your actual payment, but it's worth checking you're using it because it's one of those benefits that quietly goes unused by a lot of pensioners who simply forget it's there. It's also worth keeping in mind the wider picture of support available alongside NZ Super itself. Things like the winter energy payment, which helps with heating costs over the colder months, the accommodation supplement if your housing costs are high relative to your income, and for some pensioners, the disability allowance if you have ongoing health-related costs. None of these are automatic in the same way the annual general adjustment is, so if your circumstances have changed at all over the past year, it's worth using Work and Income's Check What You Might Get tool to see whether you're entitled to anything you're not currently receiving. So, let's bring it all together. Is MSD penalizing single pensioners in 2026? Based on the official numbers, no. Singles living alone receive the highest individual NZ Super rate of any category, higher than each person in a couple. What does exist and what's genuinely worth understanding is the difference between the living alone rate and the sharing rate, the impact of relationship status changes, the effect of tax codes when you have other income, and the ongoing importance of declaring any overseas pension entitlements. None of these are new for 2026, but all of them are exactly the kind of detail that can quietly cost you money if you're not keeping work and income up to date. The most important action you can take after watching this video is simple. Check your most recent payment against the official rates I've given you today. If something doesn't add up, don't guess, and don't rely on what you've seen shared around on social media or in forwarded messages. Contact Work and Income directly, or check your details through My MSD and get a clear, accurate answer based on your own circumstances. If you found this update helpful, make sure you subscribe to New Zealand Pension Plan. I'm David, and my goal is to help you stay informed about NZ Super, WINZ, MSD, and every important government support update that could affect your finances. Thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next update.